The Arizona summer sun beat down on the quiet residential streets of Scottsdale. I'm Emily Collins, and as usual, I was photographing the trees in my garden through my bedroom window. The sunlight illuminated the green leaves, which trembled slightly on my smartphone screen. Taking photos has become part of my daily routine. I'm always capturing moments, events at school, memories with friends, and most importantly, precious moments with my family. Lately, I've had this vague anxiety that I need to document everything important. My bedroom walls are covered with family photos, barely leaving any space. Last year's Grand Canyon trip, Christmas dinner, grandmother's birthday party. Every photo radiates with family smiles. My favorite is the one I took with grandmother 3 months ago, the day before she moved into the luxury senior home, Pleasant Valley Elder Care. In it, she's embracing me with her gentle smile. "Emily, breakfast." Mother's voice called from downstairs. Looking at the clock, it was 7:15 a.m. Just another typical morning. I pulled on my white dress uniform with a navy blazer, tied up my hair, and headed down the stairs. In the kitchen, my father Nathan was reading the newspaper while drinking his coffee. At 38, he's an accountant at a major firm who just received a promotion. His perfectly pressed shirt and meticulously tied necktie reflected his detail-oriented personality, which was highly valued at work. However, lately, the dark circles under his eyes had begun to mar his usually pristine appearance. His eyes, fixed on the financial section, showed an unusual tension. "Good morning, Emily," Father looked up from his newspaper with a gentle smile. But that smile seemed somewhat tired. "Morning, Papa." I sat next to him and started pouring syrup on the pancakes Mother had made. The familiar breakfast aroma filled the kitchen. Mother Diana was finishing up in the kitchen. At 36, she works as a real estate agent. With her sociable and cheerful personality, she's very popular with clients. Always dashing in her beige suit, Mother somehow manages to balance work and family life with a positive attitude. However, lately, something about her seemed different. This morning, for instance, her usually light movements seemed tense. Her hands lacked their usual composure as she cleared the dishes. She reacted overly sensitively to her smartphone notifications. Maybe it's just my imagination, but recently, both my parents seem to be carrying an air of being pursued by something. I'm in 7th grade. I excel particularly in science and English at Desert Mountain High School and am well trusted by my teachers. Especially Mr. Miller, my science teacher, says I might become a scientist someday. My keen observation skills are my pride. But more important than school life are my after-school visits with grandmother Martha. Grandmother has been living at the luxury senior home, Pleasant Valley Elder Care, for 3 months. A former high school English teacher, she remains sharp and insightful even at 75. She's my confidant and advisor. Her eyes still sparkle with youth when she talks about Shakespeare. However, her heart condition now requires 24-hour medical care. The facility is in the Phoenix suburbs. Although it costs $120,000 annually, the amenities are top-notch, and the staff seemed kind, at least initially. With its pool, spa, and library, it feels more like a resort hotel. "Emily, it's time for school," Mother's voice brought me back to reality. "Okay, got it." As I adjusted my uniform tie, I remembered last night. When I woke up in the middle of the night, I heard my parents talking downstairs. At an hour when they'd normally never be awake. Father's words, "We have to do something," and Mother's muffled sobs still ring in my ears. I also heard a phone ringing and Father repeatedly saying, "I understand." But what worried me most was the message I received from Grandmother yesterday. During weekend visiting hours, she gripped my hand tightly and spoke with a trembling voice. Her hands, usually composed, were unusually cold. "Emily, dear, I'm a bit worried about something." Her eyes showed a concern I'd never seen before. But she didn't explain further. She just repeated, "Be careful," several times. Walking down the facility's hallway, she kept looking back, as if afraid of being watched. In the car on the way to school, I checked photos of the facility on my smartphone. The luxurious lobby, spacious dining room, well-maintained gardens. On the surface, everything looked perfect. But in recent photos, Grandmother's expression seemed darker. There must be something hidden behind those smiles. "I'll go to the facility again after school. Surely, Grandmother has something she wants to tell me. I trust my observation skills." The changes in my parents, Grandmother's anxiety, they must be connected somehow. By continuing to take photos, I might get closer to the truth. With these thoughts, I passed through the school gates. The early morning playground was filled with wind announcing the start of a new day. The reddish-brown mountains in the distance created an unchanging landscape. This was how it all began. Back then, I couldn't imagine the gravity of what was about to happen to our family. How the peaceful daily life captured in those photos was about to change dramatically. That afternoon, I sat facing Grandmother in the facility's visiting room. The setting sun through the window gently illuminated her silver hair. But that light only emphasized her troubled expression. "Emily, would you look at this album?" Grandmother handed me an old photo album. The cover read, "My Precious Days," in her careful handwriting. As I took it, she glanced around warily. "Take your time looking. Especially." She lowered her voice, "Pay close attention to the inside of the back cover." As I flipped through the album, nostalgic photos appeared. Pictures of me as a baby, my parents' young smiling faces, family vacation memories. But remembering Grandmother's words, I carefully checked the back cover. There were several small sticky notes attached. Written in hasty handwriting were dates and brief notes. June 15th, Mrs. Johnson's ring disappears. June 28th, nighttime noises. Someone searching the room. July 3rd, asked to sign new will. July 10th, Mr. Williams, sudden illness. My hands trembled. This wasn't just a record. Grandmother was trying to expose something. "Grandma, is this?" Grandmother cut off my words with a small nod. "Emily, strange things are happening here." Just then, footsteps echoed in the hallway, and Grandmother tensed momentarily. After confirming the footsteps had faded away, she continued. "Last week, my pearl necklace disappeared. It was precious, inherited from my mother." Grandmother's voice was filled with sadness. "That's not all. At night, I sensed someone entering my room. They seemed to be searching for documents. I took out my smartphone and started recording her story. I placed it in my bag with minimum brightness, hiding it. Other residents are having similar experiences. But no one dares to speak up. They're scared. Over the next few days, I visited the facility every day after school. My smartphone camera was always ready to record any suspicious incidents. Walking through the facility's hallways, I made conversation with other residents. Under the guise of small talk, I gathered information bit by bit. Mrs. Williams had indeed fallen ill. "I haven't felt well since they changed my medication," she told me weakly. One day, when the receptionist stepped away, I managed to peek at the facility's documents. Residents' personal information and medical records were poorly managed. I found a stack of documents with unfamiliar signatures, all dated recently. However, things rapidly deteriorated. Since last week, grandmother's condition had clearly changed. "They changed my medication," she said. "When I take the new medicine, my head gets fuzzy." Her words became fragmented. Her once sharp gaze was now clouded. "Emily, if anything happens to me," grandmother clutched my hand. "I entrust all these records to you. But be careful. You might be in danger too." Those words planted a cold fear in my heart. At home, the abnormalities continued. My parents' late-night secret discussions increased. Father's phone rang frequently, and each time he'd leave the room. Mother wore an exhausted expression, sometimes with eyes red as if she'd been crying. And last night, a decisive event occurred. "Stop going to the facility." During dinner, Father suddenly declared this. His voice lacked its usual gentleness. "But I'm worried about Grandma." "Emily." Father's voice grew stronger. "This is an adult matter. You shouldn't get involved." Mother just stared at her plate in silence. For the first time, I felt scared of my parents. That night, in my room, I reviewed the evidence I'd collected. Conversations recorded on my smartphone, secretly photographed documents, sticky notes carefully removed from the album's back cover. Everything pointed to something seriously wrong at the facility. But why were my parents staying silent? No, maybe. I trembled at the possibility I didn't want to consider. My parents might be involved in the facility's problems somehow. Outside my window, stars twinkled in the Arizona night sky. Though it was the same view as always, everything felt eerie to me now. Tomorrow, I'll go to the facility again. Even if I have to defy my parents, I must uncover the truth. To protect grandmother and the other residents. The next day, when I visited the facility despite my parents' warnings, I made a shocking discovery. In grandmother's room, I found an old recording device. True to her unfamiliarity with digital devices, it was a small cassette recorder. "Emily, take this," grandmother held out the recorder with trembling hands. "Don't let anyone see it, especially your parents." The urgency in those words sent chills down my spine. Her hands were cold, lacking their usual warmth. Back in my room, when I pressed play, at first only ambient sounds came through. The noise characteristic of old cassette tapes heightened the tension. But soon, a man's voice began. "Mrs. Collins, your options are limited." A low, intimidating voice. It was Michael Brown, the facility's deputy director. "Just sign the papers, and everything will proceed smoothly." Think about your granddaughter. Grandmother's voice followed. This is blackmail. You're after my inheritance. I wouldn't recommend going to the police. They are understanding of our position. My hands trembled. This was decisive evidence. Estate fraud involving the entire facility. And the police might be involved too. Looking out the window, the twilight sky was ominously red. The recording continued. Conversations with other staff, threats to residents, and then, my parents' voices. Nathan, Diana, we can solve your debt problems. However, there are conditions. I stopped the playback. My head was spinning. Are my parents involved in this too? My smartphone on the desk gleamed ominously in the sunset light. I immediately contacted my best friend Sarah. 11-year-old Sarah is my childhood friend and only trusted confidant. We've been best friends since 5th grade at Desert Mountain School, always eating lunch together. Emily, isn't this really serious? Sarah showed a worried expression through the smartphone screen. Sarah, I have a favor. I filmed the recording with my smartphone and immediately sent it to Sarah. Don't delete this data. It's important that you have it, even if something happens to my phone. Okay, I understand, Sarah nodded without hesitation. But the police. I'm going to report it, I was determined. But first, I want to talk to my parents. There must be some explanation. That night, an unexpected development awaited. Amidst the aroma of dinner lasagna, Father suddenly spoke. How about going to Sedona this weekend? Father suggested in an unusually cheerful voice. We could use some family time. Mother agreed. Yes, it's been a while since our last family trip. But there was something artificial about that smile. Mother's hands seemed to tremble slightly. Friday, 7 p.m. Our car was driving the mountain road from Phoenix to Sedona. As street lights became scarce, darkness gradually increased. In the back seat, I pretended to sleep while observing my parents. Father's driving hands showed unusual tension. If she goes to the police, everything will be over. Father's voice echoed in the quiet car. Only the air conditioner's sound filled the heavy atmosphere. It's for Mom's sake. We have no choice. Mother's voice trembled as if holding back tears. My heart was racing. Do my parents know I have evidence? My hands holding the smartphone were sweating. Then suddenly, the car shook violently. I heard the sound of brakes being hit just before a sharp curve. Instinctively, I gripped my seatbelt. As expected, it was loose. I quickly reached for the belt in the adjacent seat and clicked it secure. By then, the car had already lost control. On the dark road. The car was heading toward the guardrail. Mother's scream. The screech of tires. And then. The impact was smaller than expected. The car hit the guardrail and slid down the slope a few meters before stopping. Thanks to the newly fastened seatbelt, I only suffered minor bruises. The moonlight reflected in the windshield created a scene that didn't feel real. Ambulance sirens approached. Too quickly. As if they had been waiting. Red and blue lights eerily illuminated the dark mountain road. As I was being placed on a stretcher, I had made my decision. This accident wasn't coincidental. My parents, they had tried to silence me. If so, my last defense would be, "Miss, are you okay? Do you remember anything?" To the paramedic's question, I slowly shook my head. "I can't remember anything." With those words, a new battle began. By pretending to have amnesia, I had to protect the truth and my life. In the ambulance, I remembered grandmother's words. "Be careful, Emily. This world is much more dangerous than you think." The red siren lights cast an eerie glow on the dark mountain road. All the evidence remained on my smartphone. And on Sarah's phone too. This truth must be revealed. Staring at the white ceiling of my hospital room, I continued playing my role. A private room at Phoenix General Hospital. The scorching Arizona sun streamed through the window. "Emily, do you know who I am?" Mother looked at me with a worried expression. Her face, with makeup worn thin, showed deep fatigue. I slowly shook my head. "I'm sorry, who are you?" Even though it was an act, seeing Mother's face contort was painful. The attending physician suggests it's likely temporary amnesia from the accident's impact. The doctor who entered the room explained. Father just nodded silently. The dark circles under his eyes seemed darker than before. And then, as expected, another visitor arrived. "This is terrible." The facility's deputy director, Michael Brown, entered the hospital room with a pleasant expression. But his eyes weren't smiling. "Mr. Collins, how is your daughter's condition?" "Her memory, completely gone," Father's voice trembled. "I see." Brown's voice held a slight hint of relief. "Well, she's young, I'm sure she'll recover." Under the blanket, I was secretly operating my smartphone. The chat screen with Sarah already contained our plan. "I'll report to the police," as Emily said. "But we need to find someone we can trust. I have all the photos and recordings of Grandma saved, so it's okay. Tomorrow morning, I'm meeting with my uncle's detective friend. Don't tell your mom and dad." Sarah was more than a best friend, she was a reliable ally. A few days later, things began to move dramatically. First, grandmother was suddenly transferred to another luxury facility. Officially, it was for more intensive medical care. In reality, I later learned she had been placed under FBI protection. Then, the investigation into Pleasant Valley elder care began. Sarah's uncle's detective friend had obtained solid evidence. Beyond inheritance fraud, there was evidence of illegal drug administration, theft of valuables, and even police bribery. Everything was coming to light. I continued to play the amnesiac. My parents' expressions showed a mix of guilt and relief. Father's behavior at night particularly concerned me. I often saw him sighing deeply by the window of my hospital room. Then, 1 week after the investigation began. "Emily." At dusk, Father quietly entered my hospital room. Mother was with him. "We'll tell you everything." Father's voice trembled. The story went back 6 months. Due to Father's failed investment and Mother's real estate transaction troubles, they had accumulated huge debts. That's when the facility approached them with a deal. If they would sign documents regarding grandmother's inheritance, their debts would be erased. We refused at first, tears flowed from Mother's eyes. But then they threatened that Mom would be in danger. We thought we were protecting Mom, Father stared at his clenched fist. But in the end, we ended up hurting our beloved daughter. At that moment, I decided there was no need to continue the act. I remembered everything all along. My parents gasped at my words. The accident, Grandma, everything. A deep silence filled the hospital room. Emily. Father's voice broke. We're truly sorry. We failed to protect you. Mother held my hand. Her hand was warm. No, I squeezed both my parents' hands back. You were trying to protect Grandma, weren't you? I might have done the same. Fresh tears welled up in my parents' eyes. This time, they were tears of relief. Outside the window, the Arizona sunset was sinking in red. A new day was about to begin. The facility scandal was widely reported, and the arrests of those involved continued for several weeks. My parents cooperated with the investigation as witnesses, acknowledged their mistakes, and entered a rehabilitation program. Then, 1 month after my discharge, when I reunited with Grandmother at the new facility, I had regained my genuine smile. Grandmother had recovered her intelligent expression and warmly welcomed us. Emily, you did well. Grandmother embraced me. Your courage saved all of us. The light streaming through the room's window gently enveloped our family. The path ahead might not be smooth, but we won't turn away from the truth anymore. That was the moment our entire family made this vow. 6 months have passed since the incident. Sunrise Senior Living, in Scottsdale's upscale residential area. This became Grandmother's new home. Colorful flowers bloom in the spacious gardens, and yoga classes are held by the pool. Most importantly, the residents' expressions are bright. I visit here every weekend. Today too, I headed to Grandmother's room with my beloved camera. Welcome, Emily. Grandmother was reading a book by the window. Her intelligent expression had returned, and her cheeks showed a healthy color. The shelves in her room were decorated with photos I had taken. Photos of peaceful days before the incident, and new memories after it. Arranged chronologically, these photos reveal our family's story. About that recent photo exhibition, Grandmother began excitedly. My photos had been selected for a local young artists exhibition. The title was Moments of Truth. The photos I had secretly taken at the facility during the incident were recognized not just as evidence, but as works of art. Photos can't lie. Grandmother put her arm around my shoulders. You knew that important truth. Father and Mother are now involved in awareness campaigns about fraud prevention in senior facilities as part of their rehabilitation program. Although paying back the debt is challenging, they're both moving forward. When I take photos, I always think I spoke to Grandmother. At the moment I press the shutter, I have a responsibility to record the truth of that moment. Yes, you've become an excellent photographer, Grandmother smiled gently. But more than that, you've become an excellent person. Outside the window, the setting sun was painting Arizona's mountains red. The sunlight is as bright as it was 6 months ago, but now it feels warm to me. Sarah is still my best friend. Our bond has grown stronger since that incident. We call ourselves the Justice Duo, and report on social issues for the school newspaper. Emily, your father and mother are here. At grandmother's voice, I turned to see my parents entering the room. The dark shadows that once haunted their expressions were gone. Let's take a family photo today. I started setting up my camera. Setting up the tripod, adjusting the timer. I think I'll call this photo a new beginning. Just before the shutter clicked, I felt it clearly. The incident took many things from us, but it also taught us important lessons. The courage to see the truth, the responsibility to record it, and most importantly, the value of believing in family. In the sunlit room, our family huddled together. This is our new beginning. We might not be perfect, but we've become a family that can face the truth. The camera's shutter sound echoed quietly. The last rays of sunlight faded in the Arizona sky. I, Emily Collins, am certain. Difficulties will surely come again. But we won't run away anymore. Like photographs, we'll face every moment with sincerity. That was the most important lesson the incident taught me. Perhaps my story, at age 12, is truly just beginning.